Elias, I have a secret.
I wanna be with you.
She took his hand before he could offer it. Her palm was cool and dry, and she held on half a second longer than a stranger should. You must be Elias. The smile was warm, and it did not reach her eyes. He talks about you, the American, the one who did not know how to hold a brush. I'm learning, Elias said. He says you learn fast. She turned back to the pot and lifted the lid, and the smell of groundnut soup and smoked fish came up into the room. Sit. You will eat. In this house, nobody stands in the doorway. I don't want to trouble you. It is not trouble. It is Tuesday. She set out a third bowl without asking whether he wanted it and wiped her hands on a cloth. I am Amma, by the way. A beat, easy, the way a woman names the weather. His wife. The room did not spin. That was the strange part. The room stayed exactly where it was. The soup went on breathing steam. The mango branch went on scraping at the window. Somewhere below the hill, a radio went on playing something with a horn in it. And Elias stood in the middle of all that ordinary evening while 6 weeks of floor came up under him at once. He looked at Kwesi. Kwesi was looking at the floorboards. That was the whole answer, and it took less than a second. Elias was out the door before he knew he had moved. He got 20 yards down the lane before Kwesi caught him. The hand that closed on his arm was the same hand that had folded over his on a brush that afternoon, and Elias hated that he knew the weight of it. Elias, Elias, listen to me. Don't touch me. It is not what you are thinking. I don't want to hear it. It came out of him like something thrown. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. And every day you had a wife at the top of this hill, and every day you let me stand in your studio like a... He could not finish it, because finishing it meant saying out loud what he had allowed himself to become. You put my hands in your dye. You put your hands on mine. I know what I did. Then tell me, it was nothing. The rain had not started yet. The air was holding still for it. Tell me it was nothing, and I'll go home tonight and we'll both call it a good summer. Kwesi did not say it. That was the worst answer available to him, and it was also the only honest one, and Elias tore his arm free and did not look at him again. Kwesi let go. He did not chase a second time. And above them both, at the top of the lane, Amma stood in the lit doorway with her arms folded, having watched all of it. Her voice came down the hill, level and unhurried, in the tone of a woman who has already lost this argument once tonight. Kwesi, you need to tell him the whole truth. Kwesi did not turn around. And will he believe me? If this story is already moving you, take 1 second to like and subscribe. It helps us keep bringing Black love stories like this one to life. He did not go back to Osu. He went down to the water instead because the water was the only thing in this country that had never asked him for anything. The tide was out. The beach past the fishing boats was empty, the light going amber and then bronze and then nothing at all, and the sand still held the day's heat in a way that came up through his shoes. He walked in with his clothes on, ankle, knee, thigh. The Atlantic was warm as blood and stronger than it looked, and it dragged at the canvas of his trousers and pushed him gently, patiently, sideways. He kept going. He was not thinking. That was the part that frightened him afterward in daylight when he could think again. That there had been no thought in him at all. Only the wanting to stand somewhere that the last hour had not happened. The water reached his waist. Then the wind turned, and it brought him the whole coast at once. Wood smoke and frying plantain from the stalls behind the seawall, wet rope, two-stroke exhaust, salt drying on hot stone, and underneath all of it the green mineral breath of the ocean itself, older than every man who had ever lied to him. And then, closest of all, rising off his own soaked hair, rosemary. The oil his mother had worked into his scalp with both hands at the door in Brooklyn, 6 weeks and 4,000 miles ago. Still there. Ruby's kitchen came up around him whole, goat stew and ginger, her palm flat on the back of his neck, her voice saying, "Come back when you know what your hands are for." Elias stopped moving. He stood chest deep in the Atlantic and smelled his mother. Then he turned around and waded back and sat down hard in the wet sand, soaked through, shaking, alive and furious about all three. He stayed away from Jamestown for 4 days. He painted in Akosua's courtyard instead, on scraps, on a warped board, on the back of a broken calendar. And everything he made came out the color of an argument. She watched him from the kitchen door and did not ask, which was its own kind of asking. On the 4th evening, she came out with 2 cold bottles of ginger beer, sat down heavily in the plastic chair beside him, and waited until he spoke first. "Auntie, can I ask you something?" "You have been asking me something for 4 days. You have only been doing it with paint." He almost laughed. "If a man here is—" He turned the bottle in his hands, looking for a word that would not cost anything, and did not find one. "If a man is like me, what does he do?" Akosua drank. Somewhere over the wall a child was being called in for the 3rd time. "In this country a man can lose everything for what he is," she said. "His work, his mother, his freedom, not always, not everywhere. But often enough that every man like you knows somebody it happened to." She set the bottle on her knee. "So, some of them build a house in front of the house, and the people inside it. Some of them are also hiding." She looked at him properly then. "I had a cousin, Kofi. He lived 40 years with a man he called his business partner, and all of Osu called him that too. To his face, at his table, at his funeral. Kofi's mother went to that man's house every Sunday for 30 years and never once used another word for him. That was the arrangement. That was also the love. Both things. At the same time. It's still a lie." "Yes." She patted his knee twice, the way Ruby did. "I am not telling you it is right. I am telling you it is old, and that the men who build them are not always cowards. Some of them are only tired." She stood, her joints complaining, and went into her stew, and left him with the thing he had not wanted. Understanding. Understanding was worse than betrayal. Betrayal he could have walked away from clean. The card had been on the shelf above his cot since the market. Julius Danso, and beneath it, a company name with the word Holdings in it. Heavy cream stock, letters you could feel with a thumb. Elias had turned it over perhaps 40 times. He hated what it did to him, because there was a voice in him that sounded exactly like Silas Vance, and the voice was not cruel. That was the problem. It was reasonable. It said, "That man has a plan and a bank, and you have a brush and a lie you told your mother." It said, 6 weeks, and what do you have to show? It said, your father never once in his life took a wage from a man who was going to disappear in the rainy season. He had come 4,000 miles to get out from under that voice and had found it waiting for him in his own mouth. Patient. Buttoned to the collar. He thought about calling Ruby and asking her what to do, and knew before the thought finished that he would not, because the first question out of her would be, Who is this man? And the second would be, why does it matter so much to you what a stranger thinks you are worth? And he had no answer to the second one he could say out loud to his mother. He put the card back on the shelf. He turned the light off. He took the card down again in the dark, twice, just to hold it. The car found him on the Osu Road 2 mornings later, which meant it had not been looking by accident. The window came down on cold air and bergamot. Young Vance. Danso never took the sunglasses off. Ride with me. 10 minutes of your life. I'm walking to the market. The market has been there 500 years. It will wait for you. The door opened by itself. The interior was cold enough to raise the hair on Elias's arms, and Akra went past behind tinted glass in a version of itself he did not recognize. Quieter, prettier, further away, the whole roar of it sealed out like weather. You are wondering what I want. Danso said it comfortably. Everybody in this city wonders that. It is exhausting for them and restful for me. I'm wondering how you knew where I'd be. I know where everything is. That is the entire business. He turned the heavy gold ring once around his finger. Do you know what the year of return actually is? Every one of them coming home for the feeling, standing at that door of no return with their hands on the stone, crying, buying kente, flying back to Atlanta on Sunday. It is beautiful. I have nothing bad to say about it. The smile widened. I came home for the land. Elias laughed politely. He would remember that sentence later. In a doorway at Cape Coast, in a courtroom with a lawyer in a second-hand blazer, and 9 years after that, in a Harlem community meeting where a man in a very good suit explained why a lot on 129th Street was already spoken for. And each time he remembered it, he would not laugh. You are not going to ask me what I do with it, Danso said. You'll tell me. I will. He seemed genuinely delighted. That is the first honest thing anybody has said to me all week. The building was an airport residential, glass and pale concrete, and a lobby that smelled of nothing at all. On the 4th floor, Danso opened a door onto a white room, 40 feet of it, with a clean north window and a floor that nobody had spilled anything on yet. Artists need light, he said. Northern light. It does not move all day. I did not know that until a painter told me, and then I bought a building with it in. Elias walked out into the middle of the room. His own footsteps came back at him off the walls. Whose is it? Nobody's. That is the point of it. Danso spread his hands. It is yours. Free. And a stipend. Call it a fellowship. It looks better on paper, and it lets my accountant sleep. He named the figure. It was more than Silas earned in a season of subcontracts. Elias stood in all that emptiness and felt something move in him that was ugly and honest at the same time. He wanted it. Not the money. He could not have explained the money. What he wanted was the smell of a floor that would never flood. A roof that was not somebody's favor. A room where he would not have to be grateful every single day for being allowed to stand in it. Why me? Because you are young and you are good, and in 2 years you will be very good, and I would rather own the 2 years than the 20. Danso shrugged. I am not a mysterious man, Elias. I am only an early one. I'm 19. Even better, Danso said. What do you want? Elias said. In return. Access. To what? The work. A pause exactly long enough to be heard. And the artist. He crossed the room without hurrying. He never hurried, and settled a broad hand at the back of Elias's neck. Warm, proprietary. the gesture of a man who had never once been told no and had grown fascinated by the word. "Do you know what boateng is?" Danso said pleasantly. "He is a very fine painter. He is also a rented boat. I pay for the scaffold. I pay for the wall. I pay the boys who mix his lime, and I pay the man at the assembly who signs the permission. When I stop paying, the wall stops. It has stopped before. Ask him about the wall on Kojo Thompson Road sometime and watch what his face does." The hand stayed where it was. "I do not rent people I like," he said. "I keep them." Elias did not move and understood several things at once and in the wrong order: that the room was not free, that nothing in this man's country was free, that the price had been quoted to him in a language with no numbers in it, and that he was expected to be sophisticated enough to hear it and not vulgar enough to say it out loud. "I should get back," he said. "Of course." The hand lifted. The warmth never faltered. That was the frightening part. Refusing cost nothing. The offer simply stayed open behind him like a door in a house whose address he now knew. "Take the week. Take a month. I am not a man in a hurry." Danso smiled at the north window. "I am a man who buys land." He said he needed to think, and Danso said, "Take all the time you like," in the voice of a man who has never lost anything he decided to wait for. Back in Osu, Elias sat on the edge of the narrow cot with the card in his hand and tried to name what he had felt in that white room. It was not desire. He turned that over carefully, twice, and was sure of it. Danso had done nothing to him that Kwesi did not do with a single look across a workbench. It was the smell of a floor that would never flood, of a rent that would never be late, of a man who would never say you'll come back when you're hungry, because he had already made certain you never would be. Silas had raised him to be starving. That was the entire architecture of his childhood. Work is scarce, love is a wage, and a man who cannot feed himself has no business having opinions about anything else. Danso had walked into that building and found the hunger sitting exactly where it had always sat and set a plate down beside it, and never once said the price out loud. And the terrible thing, the thing Elias would not say to another living person for 9 years, until a night in Harlem with a man who built towers and understood being bought, was that for about 90 seconds in that white room he had wanted to say yes, not to Danso, to never being hungry again. On the 6th day, the light went wrong. Accra's blue drained out of it, and a green came into the underside of the clouds, a color Elias had never seen in a sky and would never afterward find in a paint tin. Sick and luminous, the color of a bruise lit from the inside. The air stopped moving, completely. The compound went quiet the way a room goes quiet when somebody has said something unforgivable. Then everybody moved at once. Akosua and 2 cousins pulled the laundry down in armfuls. A boy ran past the gate with a sheet of roofing tin held over his head like a shield. Somebody's radio said the word storm, and everybody kept working. "Inside," Akosua said, going past him with a basket on her hip. "It is coming off the sea, and it is coming fast." "How long?" "An hour. Less." She stopped in the doorway and looked at him, and Elias understood that she had been watching him for 4 days and had already read the whole of a sentence he had not written yet. "Elias." "Auntie." "The road at the bottom of Jamestown floods," she said. "Past the knee. It floods every year, and every year some fool is caught on the wrong side of it." A pause. Do not be a fool late. If you are going to be one early. Elias stood in the middle of the courtyard with a wet shirt in his hands and the green light on his face. Then he put the shirt in the basket and went for the road. He caught a trotro as far as the ring road, jammed shoulder to shoulder with market women and a man holding a live chicken with the calm of long practice. And he walked the rest. Down through lanes he now knew by their smells. Bread here, drains there, charcoal, dried fish, sawdust from the carpenter's yard, and underneath all of it, the mineral breath of the Atlantic waiting at the bottom of everything. The first rain came in fat, separate drops that hit the dust like coins and stayed round for a second before they sank. Shutters came down the length of the street in a rolling clatter. A woman shouted at him from a doorway, laughing, calling him a fool in Ga, and then again in English, so that he would be sure of it. And he raised a hand to her and kept going. His shirt went from mustard to ochre as it soaked, and the linen turned heavy and honest against his back. Somewhere behind the rooftops, the thunder had started, still far out over the water, arriving so long after its lightning that the storm felt enormous and unhurried, a thing working to a schedule that had been set before anyone asked. By the time he reached the sea road, the sky had shut like a lid and the water was coming sideways off the rocks, and he could taste salt that had never touched the ground. He was running. He was also, he realized, smiling. And he had no intention whatsoever of examining why. He found Kwesi on the studio roof in the wind, barefoot on wet tin, hauling a tarp down over the north side with a rope held in his teeth. He did not say, "What are you doing here?" He did not say, "You came." He took the rope out of his mouth and pointed with his chin. "Corner. There. Pull." So Elias pulled. They worked half an hour without a conversation. 4 hands on rope and canvas, the tarp cracking like a sail, the sea below going the color of gunmetal and hitting the rocks hard enough to come up through the stilts and into their knees. Twice the wind took the canvas, and twice they got it back. Once Elias's foot went out from under him and Kwesi's hand closed on his wrist and held him, without comment, until his feet found the tin again, and then let go, without comment. "Tighter," Kwesi said. "That knot will open in the night." "It's fine." "It is fine until 3 in the morning when the roof is in the sea and I am standing in the rain explaining to my landlord that it was fine." He crouched and redid it himself, fast, without making anything of it. "Now it is fine." When the last corner was set, he dropped through the hatch, and Elias followed, and the wind slammed the door for them, and the sudden inside quiet was louder than the storm had been. The light died at 7. Not just the studio, the whole quarter. Jamestown went black in a single breath, and there was a moment of complete darkness in which Elias could hear the man across the room breathing and nothing else at all. Then a match. Kwesi's hands cupped around it, his face coming up orange out of nothing, and the kerosene lantern caught and steadied. The room came back one object at a time. Jars of pigment throwing color on the ceiling. Canvases leaning against the wall like people waiting to be called. The wide window a sheet of running water with no sea behind it, only the sound of it. Rain on corrugated tin is not a sound. It is a room you sit inside. "Every year," Kwesi said, setting the lantern down on the workbench. "Every year they promise us the cable. Every year the storm comes first." He sat down across from Elias. "You are soaked." "So are you. I live here. You came 4 kilometers to be soaked. It is not the same thing." There was a long silence with the rain in it. "I did not think you would come back," Kwesi said. "I didn't either." Then why did you? And Elias, who had rehearsed a speech the entire way down the hill, 6 days of it, sharpened, every line a small clean cut, found that the room was too small and too lit and smelled too much of linseed and salt and rain on hot wood for any of it to survive. So he said the true thing instead. Because 4 days of hating you didn't take, and I need to know whether that's my fault or yours. The road floods at the junction, Kwesi said. By now it will be past the knee. I know. So you knew when you came down. Yes. Kwesi took that in and did not do anything clever with it, which Elias was grateful for in a way that annoyed him. Thunder came over the water so long after its lightning that it seemed to belong to a different night altogether. Then you will sleep here, Kwesi said. There is a drop cloth. It is not comfortable. I've slept on worse. In Brooklyn, my father made me sleep in the truck once, all night, because I gave him too much lip about a job I didn't want to do. Elias heard himself say it and did not entirely know why he had. Kwesi's face did something complicated. How old? 14. He turned a jar of pigment a quarter turn on the bench, the way another man might light a cigarette. And here you are, 4 kilometers in a storm, sleeping on a floor because you chose to. He looked up. Your father should be careful. He is teaching you the wrong lesson extremely well. Elias's shirt was stuck to him. His hands were shaking, and it was not the cold. Tell me the truth, he said. All of it. Not the version that makes you look good, and not the version that makes you look bad either. I'll sit here for all of it. Kwesi looked at the lantern for a while. Then sit, he said. Her name is Ama Boateng. It was Ama Mensa. We married on a Tuesday at the registry in Accra Central with 2 witnesses from her church who believed they were doing something holy. Kwesi turned his hands over and looked at the indigo in the beds of his nails while he talked. Her landlord had begun asking why no man came for her. That is how it starts here, not with police, with a landlord. A woman of 24 with her own money and no husband is a question, and a question becomes a rumor, and a rumor is a thing that people feel entitled to solve on your behalf. He glanced up. 3 months before that, my cousin Nee was beaten outside a bar in Bukom. 4 men. They took his phone and his shoes, and they told him what he was while they were doing it. He went to the police station with his eye swollen shut like a fist, and they laughed at him and asked him what he had been wearing. Jesus. He lives in Kumasi now. He is a good man. I have not seen him in 3 years. Kwesi shrugged, and it was not a light gesture. So, Ama needed a husband and I needed a wife, and we are friends, and we did the arithmetic. And you? We have never shared a bed. Not once. Not on the wedding night. Not since. He said it flatly as a fact, without pleading for anything. She is my friend. She is my sister. She is my roof, and I am hers. Her mother believes I am a disappointment who paints walls for a living, and that is useful, because a disappointed mother-in-law does not look closely at anything. The rain kept building its room around them. You want me to say it is love, Kwesi said. It is not love. I will not dress it up for you. It is a wall I built around a house so that nobody would ask what lives inside it. And what lives inside? Kwesi looked at him across the lantern for a long moment. Nothing, he said. For 3 years, nothing lived inside it at all. You let me walk into it. Yes. For 6 weeks. Yes. You could have told me the first day, in the market. 2 words. I could have. Kwesi did not soften it. Shall I tell you why I did not? Because for 6 weeks I was a man with no wall. You did not know there was one. So when you looked at me, there was nothing standing in front of me. His jaw worked once. That is the most selfish thing I have ever done. And I would like to tell you that I am sorry, but I am only sorry that it ended. Elias found, sitting there, that he could not get his anger to catch. It kept guttering out against the plain fact of the man. A wall built around a house. He thought about his own father, who had built one too, and put his son inside it, and called it a trade. He thought about Akosua's cousin Kofi and 30 years of Sundays and a word that nobody said at the funeral. He thought about how many men he was going to meet in his life who had learned to make a shelter out of a lie, and how few of them would ever sit in a blackout with the rain coming down and tell him the truth about it. I hated you for 4 days, he said. Kwesi nodded, accepting the invoice. And now? Now I'm angry that you had to. Elias turned the jar in his hands. That's worse. You know that's worse. I know, Kwesi said. Anger, you can put down. The lantern hissed. Then Kwesi stood up and said absurdly, You have not eaten, and lit the gas burner, and the blue ring of flame made the entire night change its mind. I'm not hungry. That is not a fact about hunger. It is a fact about your mood. He was already moving. Onion, tomato, a Scotch bonnet he split with his thumbnail. Sit there. Do not help me. You chop like a man doing arithmetic. He cooked the way he painted. No measuring, total conviction, whole minutes of standing perfectly still, and then a burst of certainty. The rice went in to take the color. Steam came up and put a warm hand on both their faces. Jollof rice in a blackout, in a storm, on the lip of the Atlantic, out of one dented pot. He found palm wine in a jerrycan and poured it into 2 paint-stained jars, and they sat down on the floor with their backs against the workbench and their shoulders touching and ate with their fingers, because there was 1 spoon and neither of them wanted it. This is better than Auntie Akosua's, Elias said. I will deny saying that. You will deny it to my face and repeat it to hers, and she will beat you with a spoon for lying to a woman who feeds you. He told a story about a goat that had got up onto the scaffold on Kojo Thompson Road and stood there for 4 hours while 3 men and a policeman negotiated with it. And Elias laughed until he had to put his jar down on the boards. And the laugh turned into something else halfway through, and he had to look at the ceiling for a moment. Kwesi let him. He did not name it. He only pushed the pot an inch closer and said, Eat more. Afterward, Kwesi took a jar of indigo down off the shelf and set it in the lantern light, and the blue in it looked like something that had been alive fairly recently. You know Adinkra? I've seen the shapes. Cloth, jewelry, the stalls at the airport. Everybody has seen the shapes. He wet a fine brush. Nobody asks them what they say. They are not decoration. They are sentences. He drew on the bare boards between them as he spoke, quick and sure. A bird, its body walking forward, its head turned all the way back. Sankofa. Go back and get it. It is not nostalgia. That is what the tourists make of it. It is an instruction. Whatever you left behind that you still need, go back for it. It is not shameful to return. 2 ram's horns, locked together. Duenamin, strength and humility in the same body, or it is not strength. The ram will fight anything. The ram also puts its head to the earth when it is time. He glanced up. A man with only the horns is a bully. A man with only the head down is furniture. A small crowned lattice, careful and symmetrical. Nyami inti, by God's grace. It is what you say when you have survived a thing you had no business surviving. He held the brush still. Rain on the tin. Somewhere below the boards, the Atlantic going about its 10,000-year business. My grandmother dyed cloth in Antonso, he said. She put these on people her whole life, on cloth for funerals mostly. I am the first man in my family to put them on a wall instead of a body. Then he looked up. Take off your shirt. Elias's hands did the buttons badly. The wet linen came away, and the air off the storm found his skin, and he sat very straight on the stool with his heart going like the tin above them. Kwesi knelt down in front of him, loaded the brush, and then waited. Waited long enough that it stopped being preparation and became a question, and Elias answered it the only way that was available to him, by breathing out and letting his shoulders down. The first line went over his sternum, cold, and he shivered and did not move. Sankofa, the backward-looking bird, drawn slowly, the brush lifting and returning, indigo running blue-black over medium-dark brown. Kwesi worked with his whole attention, the same attention he gave a wall 4 stories up with the whole street watching. Go back and get it, he said quietly, to the shape and not to Elias's face. Everything they told you to leave in New York, your grandmother's hands, the way you cried in front of the mural and told me it was the dust. I did not cry. You cried. The brush moved. Go back and get all of it. It is not lost. It is only behind you. That is the whole teaching, that the thing behind you is still yours, and that turning around is not the same as going backwards. Elias looked down at the wet blue on his own chest and thought about a man in a cream linen suit offering him a floor that would never flood, and about how nothing in that white room had cost this much or been worth 1/10 of it. Keep going, he said. The ram's horns went at the point of his shoulder, one on each side of the bone, the brush turning where the muscle turned. Elias watched the top of Kwesi's head, the gold cuffs on the twists catching the lantern, the concentration, the mustache moving as he mouthed each shape before he drew it. Nobody had ever touched him with that much attention and asked for nothing back. That was the thing that undid him, not the hands. The attention. Strength and humility, Kwesi said, thumbing a run of indigo off his collarbone before it could reach his ribs. Your father gave you one of the two. Which one? Guess. He'd say he gave me both. Men who give you humility rarely call it that. The brush paused. I am not going to insult him. I have never met him, and he made you. So he did at least one thing correctly. But a man who teaches his son that he is worth exactly what he can carry has put the horns on the wrong ram. He's not a bad man. I did not say bad. I said wrong. They are very different, and people confuse them constantly, usually to protect somebody. Kwesi sat back on his heels and looked at the shoulder critically, the way he looked at a wall in the last hour of light. There. Now you are strong on that side, and you know it, and knowing it is most of the work. Elias's laugh came out of him shaped like something else entirely. Kwesi did not comment on that either. The last one he put over the heart. He had to lean in close to do it. Close enough that Elias could feel the heat coming off his chest, close enough that the brush was very nearly unnecessary. Niamenti. By God's grace. Kwesi's hand was steady. Everything else in the room was not. You were going to take his money, he said, to the shape he was drawing. Elias did not pretend not to understand. I don't know. You were. A pause with rain in it. He offered me a studio, Elias said. North Light, a stipend, He put his hand on the back of my neck while he did it and told me what it would cost without ever telling me, and I stood there and He stopped. I wanted the floor, not him. The floor. I know exactly what you wanted. The brush kept moving, patient. I took it. 8 years ago. Not that offer. A smaller one. The first rung. The one they give you while you are still cheap. His voice did not change at all. That is how he came to own the wall on Kojo Thompson Road, and how he owns half of everything I have painted since. Take it, if you must. He will own the light you paint in, and he will call it a gift, and it will be a gift. That is the trick of the thing. It is always genuinely a gift. The brush lifted. I have nothing to set against a building, Kwesi said. Elias put his hand over Kwesi's wrist and held it there. You have this, Elias said, and pulled him up by the wrist and kissed him. 6 weeks of not saying it went into it at once. Kwesi made a sound low in his throat, a man setting down something he had carried much too far. And then his hands came up and took Elias's face the way they took a brush. Sure, unhurried, all attention. Elias kissed him back harder. He learned the mustache against his upper lip, the give of the lower lip, the salt at the corner of his mouth and the palm wine underneath it. The heat of a palm sliding to the back of his neck and holding him exactly where he already wanted to be, and the small, helpless sound Kwesi made when Elias's fingers closed in his twists and the gold cuffs clicked together. They broke apart once, an inch, breathing. Say something, Elias said. Say what? Anything that isn't sorry. Kwesi's thumb moved along his jaw. Misumu bo, he said. It is ga. My grandmother's language, not my school one. It means I love you. It also means I like you. The same word does both, which is either lazy or extremely wise, and I have not said it to anybody since I was 19 years old. And Elias kissed him again, and this time, neither of them stopped. Wet indigo pressed between their chests and printed itself backward onto Kwesi's skin. Sankofa reversed, the bird looking the other way. Their bodies danced in the glow of lantern flame. The flame embers bent in a draft and steadied, witnessing their love. The rain went on. Below the boards, the Atlantic worked at the rocks the way it had for 10,000 years, patient, and getting exactly what it wanted. Later, the lantern was down to a bead, and the storm had gone from a roar to a long, steady conversation on the roof. They lay on a paint-stiff drop cloth with a folded tarp for a pillow, fingers laced, Elias's chest still tacky with drying blue, and a mirrored smear of it printed across Kwesi's. Neither of them made a speech of it. Kwesi hummed something in Ga. 4 notes, over and over, and stopped when Elias's breathing changed. What is that? A fishing song. It is about a man who cannot come home until the tide lets him. A pause. It is not a happy song. It is only a true one. What happens tomorrow? Elias said to the ceiling. Tomorrow the road drains. That's not an answer. No. Kwesi's thumb moved once across his knuckles. Because I do not have one. I have a wife who is my friend. I have a patron who owns my walls. I have a country that will put me in the back of a van if the wrong man decides to be offended on a Tuesday. And I have you on my floor for one night with my grandmother's alphabet drying on your chest. He breathed out. It is a Tuesday. I have never been given anything else. That's a terrible answer. It is the only honest one available, and you ask me specifically for those. Elias laughed quietly and did not let go of his hand. He fell asleep listening to water find its way down 4,000 corrugations of tin, and to a man beside him breathing like somebody who had finally put something heavy down. The power came back at 10 the next morning with a whoop that went up from the whole quarter at once. Elias sat on the seawall in the washed light with 2 bars of signal and called Brooklyn, and his mother's face filled the screen in her kitchen in the wax print head wrap he could have described with his eyes shut. There he is. There's my son. Ruby leaned in far too close, the way she always did. You're thin. I'm not thin, Ma. You're thin and you're wet. It rained. There was a storm. The whole quarter lost power. He stopped because he could hear how much of that sentence he was not going to be able to say. Auntie feeds me like it's Christmas. Every day. I've gained, if anything. She was not fooled, and she let it go, which was its own kind of grace. Are you painting? Every day. And are you happy? She asked it lightly. She had never once asked it lightly. Yeah, Elias said, and was astonished to find that it was true even now, even after everything, even with his chest still faintly blue under a clean shirt. Yeah, Ma, I am. Ruby's whole face changed, and she looked away from the camera for a second and back. Then that's the money well spent, she said. And then, behind her, in the dim of the front room, his father coughed, and coughed again. A second one, deeper, with a tear in it, going on a beat too long. Ruby's eyes went somewhere for half a second before she brought them back. Tell me about the market, she said. Amma came down to the studio at noon, which she never did. She wore a good dress, and she had done her face, and she stood in the doorway with the sea burning white behind her and would not come in. Kwesi went still the way he had gone still under the mural, the warmth folding shut, the shutters coming down over a house. Amma. She did not look at him. She spoke to Elias. I am not here to fight you. Her hands were folded at her waist, and they were perfectly steady, and Elias understood that she had rehearsed this the entire way down the hill. Whatever you have decided that I am not that. I know what you saw on Tuesday. I know what you think it makes me. I don't think anything about you. That is not true, and you are too young to lie well. It was not unkind. That was the worst of it. None of it was unkind. I have been his wife for 3 years, and his friend for 9. I have covered for him with my mother, with my church, with my landlord, and with 2 policemen at a checkpoint outside Tama at 1 o'clock in the morning. I did not do any of that in order to be the villain in somebody's love story. Amma, Kwesi said. I am talking, still not looking at him. I came down here myself because you were going to hear it from somebody today, and I would rather it was me standing in front of you than a rumor walking up that hill. The sea went on behind her. I am pregnant.